Welcome to the Fantasy Champions Fantasy Football Podcast. Here's your host, Morgan Colby and Rick Lemon.
Welcome to the Fantasy Champions Fantasy Football Podcast. It is Thursday, or Friday. I should say Friday, January 17th. We're pushing this episode back one day. Didn't change the show notes. Was too lazy. My name is Morgan Colby. I got Rick Lemon still on audio or a call.
I have minutes left to live.
Yeah.
I just want to see Mahomes raise a trophy.
Yeah, stop that. On this episode of the Fantasy Champions Podcast, we give you our part 2 of the consistency series for quarterbacks. I didn't update the show notes, so I almost said the wrong thing there. But we have part 2 of the consistency series for quarterbacks. 12 quarterbacks 13 through 24 is what we're going to discuss today. So it should be interesting. Before we get into our question to start the show, be sure to do the following. Check out our website, thefantasychampions.com. Follow us on Twitter at the FFChamps, on Instagram at thefantasychampions. Like us at facebook.com/thefantasychampions. Subscribe wherever you listen, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, YouTube. Click the bell on YouTube for notifications for whenever we post a brand new video. Leave a review and share this podcast with your friends. Let's get into the question. Who do you think will be a breakout quarterback in 2020?
Now, it's way too early for this question. I have not done any research. Is it too early to say Joe Burrow?
Yes.
You know who?
What team is he going to be on, Rick?
The Cincinnati Bengals.
Oh, yeah.
One name that kind of popped out the list to me, though.
Yeah.
Which you might be surprised with this answer. You know who is very intriguing to me for next season?
Okay.
Baker Mayfield.
Interesting.
There's a lot of hype on him this past season. He obviously choked big time, but new head coach, another year with guys like Odell, another year of less expectations this time, but it's his third year in the NFL.
Mm-hmm.
I do think, Mayfield, this is the make or break season, because if Mayfield has another bad year, I mean, we're going to be talking about him as a bust, but he could also come out this year and have a good season. He's got plenty of weapons, and Njoku's going to be healthy this time. I think there's a chance. I'm not saying it's going to happen, but I think there's a chance Mayfield could break out this year.
Yeah, I agree. I think I agree with most of all of your points. The specific point that probably stands out the most is the fact that this year, third years for quarterbacks really make or break whether or not they're going to be good or not. Goff had a really great third year. Wentz had a really great third year. So you see some of these guys, third year really decides who they are.
It's very important, yeah.
Very important. I'm going to say one guy that you haven't said yet. And with these guys, you got to deep dive. You got to go deep into this. This is not as deep a dive as I would like to believe. But I'm going to shoot in the dark, and I'm going to say Sam Darnold. And the only reason why I say Sam Darnold is because I believe the Jets are probably going to add some pieces to their offense. Yeah. And I think that Darnold is, we both agree Darnold is extremely talented. He's not a fantastic, he hasn't put up fantastic numbers. He obviously missed a couple of games this year. I don't believe we talk about him on this episode. We don't even talk about him on this episode. But I actually think that you give him a couple, you give him the games back that he had this year, he actually might be able to get to 3,800 passing yards. His big problem is just staying consistent. And but if they want him to step forward and be that big-time quarterback, I think Sam Darnold could actually be a guy next year. Now, I want to break down a lot more during the offseason and see what happens, but I could have said Kyler Murray.
Yeah.
But I didn't.
I agree with Darnold. The only problem is, as of today, he's got no offensive line, and his receivers are at best mediocre.
Right.
And that's being kind.
Right.
So he does need a lot of help around him before I think he can take that next step.
Now,
but I do think he has the talent to do so.
What about Daniel Jones?
That he was actually second on my list, behind Mayfield. I think because he's got, again, a lot of talent in front of him.
I don't know about Joe Judge.
Patriots
that's his name, right?
offensive
The new
coordinator.
head coach.
Or,
Yes, yeah.
Patriots wide receiver coach, forgive me.
Right. I don't know how that's going to work out.
Yeah.
It seems like it's kind of like a setup for failure, or maybe like a bridge type of coaching job.
Right.
Which is not good news. But again, there's a lot of talent on that offense.
Well, they don't want it to be a bridge coaching job.
No. But it
5
just feels
years.
like it's it
could be bad.
Gosh, I don't know.
Yeah, you make a good point on that. I feel good about him, but I also he had some.
But Golden Tate.
He played in 11.
Shepard,
he played in
Slayton,
13
Evan
games.
Ingram only played in 6 games.
He's got so much
season.
talent around him.
Saquon Barkley, if they draft an offensive lineman,
right,
or add one in free agency, or 1 or 2 guys,
mm-hmm.
I mean that's going to be a very, very talented offense.
Right.
So he's going to have the pieces around him. The head coach is the only reason why I didn't say Daniel Jones instead of Baker Mayfield.
Yeah. Obviously, we'll go through it the whole offseason. Another name that really quickly I just wanted to mention, if he wins the starting job, is Gardner Minshew, who is absolutely fantastic this year. 3,271 yards, 21 touchdowns, 6 interceptions in a total of 14 games. So he had actually a very good season. He probably wouldn't have reached 4,000 yards, but 21 touchdowns, that's pretty good. And only throwing 6 picks, that's something that a rookie quarterback doesn't normally do.
That is impressive.
And he also rushed for 344 yards, so he could actually be, as gross as it sounds, with that offense. He's going to throw the football a lot. Doug Marrone loves to throw the football, and I'm kind of pissed he's still there, but if they add some pieces to the receiving core and they make better decisions, play calling. Mm-hmm. I mean, Minshew's in his second year. He could actually be very good next year.
Yeah, I mean, he's definitely a guy that could fly under the radar.
But he also kind of reminds me of Baker.
Yeah, a little bit.
So anyway, let's move into our consistency series quarterbacks part 2 segment. We're going to discuss quarterbacks 13 through 24 on this episode. And then we're going to, I believe we talk about Gardner in this episode. So
we do.
We go in a little bit more detail, but let's start off with the number 13th quarterback, a guy that disappointed, Jared Goff. He had 8 QB1 finishes, which is more than the 3 guys ahead of him, and then he had 3 QB2 finishes. He played in 12. What was it? He played in all 16 games, so that means that he completely crapped his pants in about 5 games. But he finishes a QB1 50% of the time. This is not against what we thought Jared Goff is.
No.
Good at home, bad on the road, good against good matchups, bad against bad matchups, right? So, I mean, when you have Jared Goff, you know what you're getting out of him. The problem with Jared Goff is simply that you can't start him every week. So if you draft him or you put him on your team...
I think this year was more extreme, though, than even last year. Last year, his good games, he would go off and get 30-plus points. And his good games, he finished as a QB1, but it was low 20s.
Right.
In fantasy points. He never really had a huge monster week. And he had 5 weeks where he didn't finish in the top 24 for quarterbacks. That's that crazy. Is so bad. I can count on the top of my head just remembering 3 games where he scored less than 2 points. And he played in the full game. It wasn't he got injured.
Jared Goff. They did change. I believe the Rams are changing their offensive coordinator. So I don't know if that helps anything.
Interesting.
But it's funny that 8 games. I'm curious to see those 8 games, whether they were home or away. Because those 8 games, he was a QB1. But I think for me, you're pretty confident that Jared Goff is going to have a good game against a good matchup. But against bad matchups, again on the road, he's just a trash can. It's as simple as that. So next year, if you do draft him, I'm not disagreeing with you, but have a backup plan for those other 8 games, because you're gonna have to. You're gonna have to go into those games knowing that
I think after the year he just had, I don't really think many in a 1 quarterback league.
I don't think many people are gonna draft him.
I don't think many people are gonna draft him. Yeah, maybe a 12 team or 14 team, but
yeah. Number 14 on this list, you were very adamant about this guy finishing very high and being a breakout quarterback, I calmly and logically explained to you why that wasn't going to happen. Jimmy Garoppolo finishes at the number 14 quarterback fantasy. He had 5 QB1 finishes, 6 QB2 finishes at QB1 31% of the time. I don't think that Jimmy G can or probably ever will be a high-end quarterback in fantasy football.
Don't say that. You're going to break my heart.
And I love Jimmy Garoppolo, but he's very, very, very similar to Tom Brady in almost every freaking way. And probably because Tom Brady taught him how to play the game of football.
Yeah.
Or at least in the NFL. But this year, I think he played in... how many games did you play, Jimmy? 16. He played in all 16. He had just under 4,000 yards. He was 22 yards short, I believe. And he threw 27 touchdown passes. So he's a good quarterback. I think there's going to be really great games for him every year.
And he might have 1 year. He might have 1 year
where he just busts out and goes off.
Yeah.
But at this point, to expect him to be a Lamar Jackson or a Dak Prescott like Bray, he's probably not going to do that. I could see a top 5 finish at least one time in his career. I don't know if that's going to be next season. We have to see what the schedule looks like and everything that goes on in the offseason. But, especially with this offense, they have Emmanuel Sanders who's going to be with them for a full offseason, right? They're going to have Debo, who's actually really great, and he's going to be in his second year. So, and then you got George Kittle, a good offensive line. There's no reason to believe that Jimmy G can't be a good fantasy option, but to draft him as a steady QB1 every single week,
you should.
Is just not going to happen. He's a great streaming option though.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Let's move on to the next guy on the list. Old man Phillip Rivers.
Yuck.
He is going to play another year of football, and it'll probably be with a different team.
Why?
I don't know, but he had 4 QB1 finishes. He only finishes a QB1 25% of the time. The rest of the time, he was a QB2, I believe, in the rest of his games. But only 4 times. Rivers is done. He's washed. He's out. He's even more washed than Brady. I would rather have Brady than Phillip Rivers.
Oh, 100%. I'd rather have Tom Brady than Phillip Rivers.
If you had to choose an old man quarterback,
why does he want to keep playing? It's not going to be in LA.
He wants to win a Super Bowl desperately, but it's just never going to happen.
I know, but what team is going to sign him right now? What team would honestly sign Phillip Rivers?
I can think of one.
What team? What's the one?
Miami.
See, I don't even think Miami would.
He wouldn't sign with Miami, I don't think.
I think Miami's going to go after Drew Brees or Tom Brady or Cam. They want a big name quarterback. To me, Phillip Rivers is so washed up. I don't understand why he's. I get why he's trying.
What'll probably happen is he'll probably, because I believe he is a free agent, so he'll try to play. And out of the guys available, you have Jameis Winston, Dak Prescott, Teddy Bridgewater, right? Those guys are available. And then you also have Tom Brady, Drew Brees, who would be a free agent as well. And it's and Andy Dalton is also a free agent. So it's
and
you got a lot of things to choose from. So I don't think Andy Dalton's a free agent. I'm sorry. I think he's just a trade piece. But you have 6 quarterbacks available. Why Phillip Rivers is 7 on that list, and there's not 7 teams that need a quarterback right now.
And
where does he think he's going?
Talked about much is he commutes from San Diego to LA because he doesn't want to move to LA. So if he signs with Miami, he's going to have to move his whole family of 10 kids or whatever it is to Miami. And does he want to do that?
No.
At this point in his life, I don't think he does.
Silly.
I think it's gonna. What you said makes a lot of sense. He goes into free agency, wants to play again, realizes the situation in front of him, and decides to call it quits.
Yep.
And out of those quarterbacks you named, would you rather have I know this sounds crazy, but would you rather have Andy Dalton?
Or Rivers? Yep. Andy Dalton.
Yeah, I would too.
At least get more years out of him. Put him in a good system. He's actually good, but. I think Rivers' biggest problem as far as this year was concerned, because he did throw 4,600 yards and 23 touchdowns. His biggest problem was that he threw 20 interceptions.
Yeah.
So I mean, it's not that he can't.
It looks like Manning at the end.
If he gets if he signs back with Los Angeles and they run it back, right, and they don't reset, and I
think that's the only.
Yeah, that's the only place I think that he goes. Right.
Yeah.
But I actually think he could be a decent streamable option with the Chargers. But if he goes anywhere else, I just think he's going to be a very low end QB2 that never gives you a good enough performance to put in your starting lineup. Like, you might have one surprise performance. Everyone's like, "Oh, Phillip Rivers is back," but that's not going to happen. The next guy on our list, I believe it's number 15. No, that's number 16. Is Ryan Fitzpatrick. Now, Ryan Fitzmagic, he played 15 games. He didn't start starting until later, not later in the season, but it was like an off and on excursion with Josh Allen. And then when Josh Rosen, Yeah. Josh Rosen finally was just done. Can't remember what happened. I think they benched him. He had a lot of really good games. He had 7 QB1 finishes, 5 QB2 finishes. He was a QB1 46.67% of the time, so he didn't have a whole ton of crap games. But the problem with Ryan Fitzpatrick is simple as this. They might run it back. Miami might run it back with Ryan Fitzpatrick next year.
I really highly doubt it, though.
But he's even lower on the list of priorities.
I think at this point, I think
he's either a backup quarterback or he's retiring.
Or retiring, yep.
So this might be the last of Fitzmagic, my friends. Derek Carr is the next guy on the list. Number
most average
17,
quarterback in the league.
252 fantasy points, averaged 15 fantasy points a game, played in 16 games. He actually had a relatively statistically good year, 4,000 yards, 21 touchdowns, 8 interceptions. Fantasy football-wise, though, not that great. 6 QB1 finishes, 6 QB2 finishes a QB1 37% of the time.
You got it. It's hard for Raiders fans. But imagine what Derek Carr and the Raiders could have been, I think, if Antonio Brown stayed.
Oh, that would have been so good.
I mean, I don't think Derek Carr would have been that much better, but I think, what do you have, 21 touchdowns, 8 interceptions? I think he realistically could have had like 27, 28.
Yeah, 25.
Yeah,
plus.
25 to 28, I think, touchdowns. And could have had a lot better season, and the Raiders as a whole might have been able to sneak into that wild card spot.
Right.
Because their whole offense would have been much better.
Now, would you say Carr at this point is totally washed in terms of him being able to be a valuable quarterback in fantasy football?
I would say so, unless they got Antonio Brown.
No, right.
A real difference maker, which I don't see that happening.
They're building good pieces there, and they're putting they're building something good there. It's just I don't know if Derek Carr can be you're starting to see these older quarterbacks, and Derek Carr's not an older quarterback by any means, by the way. No, but his style of play is very much old school quarterback. He only had 82 rushing yards on the season. He ran it a total time of 27. He ran it 27 total times. You see Phillip Rivers, Ben Roethlisberger, Tom Brady, guys like that, Drew Brees, they're all pocket passers. They don't run the football all over the field. Carr gets out of the pocket when he needs to and maybe gets a couple of rushing yards, but outside of that, he doesn't really add, that's 8 fantasy points right there, that he had added to his total for the whole season. So that's nothing. But for Derek Carr, he is a part of that old guard, and in an NFL where rushing yards equal significantly more fantasy points. You look even on this chart, you look at the top 12 quarterbacks or the top 11 quarterbacks in fantasy football. They all had over 100 yards rushing, and so in this new NFL, guys like that, like Jimmy Garoppolo or Derek Carr, who are probably going to be the pocket passers of the NFL for the next 5 years, are probably not going to have as great fantasy seasons as guys like, Lamar Jackson or Dak Prescott or Deshaun Watson or Patrick Mahomes. So it is concerning for guys like that. But Derek Carr might give you a couple of good games, but outside of that.
It's hard to see, for what you said, Derek Carr ever finishing in the top 10 even, just because of the rushing, unless he has a monster passing season.
Right.
Now, this isn't fantasy related, or it could be fantasy related, but could the Raiders be a team potentially looking for a new quarterback since they're moving to Las Vegas and it's like
they could. A lot of people have talked about that over even the last 2 years of just like, should they move on from Carr? I think when you have a quarterback that doesn't turn the ball over a lot and is a decent game manager, if you put together a good defense, that's all you really need to put a chip together.
No, I agree.
I don't think right now, I don't think you look at their team and go, okay, they're going to go and try to find a quarterback.
I think they're missing other pieces on that team to get them closer to a chip.
They're going to use draft picks and stuff like that than a quarterback, yeah. Number 18 on our list is quarterback Kirk Cousins. Played 15 games now. We talked about him last year and thought maybe he could have another top 10 finish. I think the only reason why he finished as low as he did is because of the way Minnesota ran their offense in the early part of the season, the first 4 to 5 weeks. You saw Dalvin Cook featured in that offense, but they were throwing it a total of like 15 times a game. And it wasn't even Kirk Cousins' fault that he wasn't performing. It was pure, just feed it to Dalvin Cook. And then they realized, oh crap, to win football games in the NFL, we got to pass it. So they started passing the ball a little bit more towards, the middle to, halfway point of the season. So Kirk Cousins was able to turn it on then and have a lot of really good performances. I remember us talking about him multiple times as a streaming option. He had, I think it was 6 QB1 finishes, 4 QB2 finishes. So he finishes a QB1s 40% of the time, which isn't bad. I think with a new offensive coordinator coming in, we're going to have to see how that offense runs. Is it still going to be I think it'll be very similar because the head coach is still the same. But are they going to run the football as much as they did this year? And is Kirk Cousins going to have as much of involvement in the passing game as he's had? And I think they're probably going to shift more towards the passing game next year because they keep falling short of their goal.
Yeah. And he did like start off very slow.
Yeah.
And then finished okay.
Right.
And like I don't think he finished well necessarily like top 10.
No,
but
right.
The first like 3 weeks of the season he was one of the worst fantasy quarterbacks in the league.
Right.
And he then I think from that point on did pretty well and was streamable from week to week.
Right. I think next year, Kirk Cousins is he's an option that as the offseason goes along, we can discuss more and more about in terms of maybe, I think he can finish in the top 10 next year, but outside of that, I really do. I think what he did over the course of the second half of the season was actually very good, but when I say top 10, I mean like QB 9. You know what I mean? Like somebody who people are going to own and want to start every week but can't because they're QB 9. So I think Kirk Cousins is a streamable option. I hope he goes undrafted because he's a perfect stream against a good matchup.
He absolutely will.
Yeah. I like I said, redrafts. I do like Kirk Cousins, but he's also one of those old pocket passing quarterbacks who does not rush it a lot. So it is concerning to see that portion. But you see these next 2 guys, actually the next 4 guys really, are the most intriguing, or the next 5 or 6 guys actually, outside of Drew Brees, are kind of intriguing to talk about because these are guys that could actually possibly break out next season. So let's break these guys down and talk about them. Number 19, Baker Mayfield. He had 250 fantasy points, 15 disappointing season. So disappointing.
Oh yeah.
Coming into the season, I was like at first. So right after the end of last season, I was like, okay, he's gonna be good. I'm excited. I'm excited to see him. He's gonna be really good. And then I was like, okay, I'm okay with drafting him in the second round, not in the second round. Holy crap. I'm okay drafting him in like the 6th or 7th round, and I was like, maybe I can get him there. And then he just started going up and up and up and up and up and overvalued to the point where I was like, don't draft Baker Mayfield. And so I thought he might still have a good season, but it was one of those things where you kind of had to tread lightly. He had 4 QB1 finishes, 7 QB2 finishes. 25% of the time he finished as a quarterback 1, so he had a very bad season. There's not a lot to look at and go, Baker's going to be a QB1 next year. But as the offseason goes along, we'll find ways. They still have Njoku. They still have Odell. They still got Nick Chubb.
Jarvis Landry.
They still got Jarvis Landry. Like, a better offensive play caller, and you're telling me that Baker...
maybe an offensive lineman or two?
It may have come a year late, but Baker Mayfield could actually be a high-end QB1 next year, and that's saying a lot.
We'll see how big the Freddy Kitchens thing was.
Right.
And how badly of coach he actually was, really.
Mm-hmm.
But also if they can add more talent to the offensive line.
Right.
And maybe Mayfield matures as well. And maybe, maybe Mayfield sucks, but also at the same time, maybe... or maybe Mayfield humbled himself a little bit with all those expectations and comes back much better this season.
Yeah.
I mean, it's going to be a huge telling for Mayfield in his career, though. It's the biggest year of his career by far.
The other thing that I kind of noticed, too, was that as we were breaking down, quarterbacks last year and even like on the coaches show last year, I was talking a little bit about how Freddy Kitchens didn't call a lot of plays offensively. And when you prorate it out to a full season, passing-wise, he's not going to call a lot of passing plays, or not even just call passing plays, but there's not going to be enough cheddar to throw around. You know what I mean? Like, there's not enough opportunity to get guys the ball. You look at, the number 2 quarterback, number 2, 3, and 4 quarterbacks in fantasy football, or just number 2, let's just say number 1 and 2. Dak Prescott had 596 passing attempts. Jameis Winston had 626 passing attempts, right? You see Carson Wentz had 607 passing attempts. Brady and Ryan had 616, 613. So it's common to see these guys finish with between 575 and 600. And then you see Baker Mayfield with 534.
That's,
And it's you want him to have more opportunity, especially when he's, I guess, one of those pocket passing quarterbacks. He did have 141 rushing yards, which is good. But so I think we'll have to see next year what he actually does. He's got to be more consistent. He's got to throw the ball better. I think play calling is going to be a huge difference maker for him. But as the offseason goes along, we'll probably talk about him 1,000,005 times.
Oh, yeah.
But I would put him very high on a breakout list for next year.
Yeah, I would too.
Number what is it? Number 20? Number 20, Gardner Minshew. Minshew Mania hit hard. After Nick Foles went down, like after the first quarter of the game, the first game for Jacksonville, broke his collarbone, and Gardner Minshew comes in and starts lighting people up, or just lighting people up.
It's Tom Brady 2.0.
Yeah,
6th round pick.
He had 14 games played, 16 fantasy points per game. Now he did have like up and down. He did have like an up and down season. So he had some really good games. He had some really bad games, but he was consistent and he didn't turn the ball over. 21 touchdowns, 6 interceptions. Talked about it a little bit earlier. He had 67 rushing attempts for 344 yards. So that's a metric right there to keep an eye on. He does rush the football.
Interesting.
So he does that. He had 4 QB1 performances out of his 14 starts, which is only 28% of the time. But I look at Gardner Minshew as a rookie quarterback who can't succeed in the NFL like normal rookie quarterbacks always do. I think next year you're going to see, if Minshew plays, this is such a key.
I think he will.
I don't know, because you're paying Nick Foles so much money.
Yeah, gosh,
and it's hard for them. I think they have to have a QB competition. It's almost like they have to. But if Gardner Minshew starts from wire to wire, from beginning to end, I think Minshew could actually be one of those. I hate to say it because it sounds so so over exaggerated, but he could be a Lamar Jackson like player.
Oh, that's a little much.
It is. Well,
I can't.
But I mean, in the context of Lamar and Mahomes,
I know. Just came out of nowhere.
You get a 14th, 15th round quarterback that people are taking, and you just slap him on your bench, and then all of a sudden he becomes a breakout.
He's going to go undrafted.
No, yeah, he's going to go undrafted for sure.
I don't see any way that unless it's a 2 quarterback league.
But if that happens, Rick, and he becomes a top 3 quarterback, I will bring this back and I will roast you.
If he becomes a top 3 quarterback, I'll dance like a jester on the podcast.
But there's also this reality that Gardner Minshew could completely poop himself and just not be a good quarterback.
Yeah. Maybe a happy medium and he just takes a step in the right direction.
Possibly.
Which I think is probably the most likely outcome.
But like, let's just think about this. You're like I just said, I think he could possibly finish as a QB1, and you were like, no way. But if I told you Lamar Jackson was going to finish as the QB1 this year before the season started, you would have most definitely been like you thought he was going to be good, and you probably would have been like, what? No.
Yeah, well, like the QB1.
Yeah.
Yeah, I wouldn't have expected that.
So I like when you're in the 14th round, 15th round, throw poop at the wall and hope it sticks.
No, I agree. I just think the only thing with Minshew is, I love Gardner Minshew, but I don't. Is the team around him good enough for him to have that type of finish?
I mean, Chark came out, was pretty good.
Chark's okay. Chark's not bad.
Their offensive line's not bad.
It's okay. It's not bad.
And Leonard Fournette's okay. Is not bad either.
He's okay.
I just don't think the pieces are so bad that you're like looking at it like.
No. They're not bad, but they're not good.
Like
either.
A team like Sam
average.
Darnold. Like, who has a better chance of finishing higher, Sam Darnold or Gardner Minshew?
As of right now, I'd say Minshew, but if the Jets are any.
Like, it could be worse.
At all.
Point is, it could be worse for Minshew. And I took Sam Darnold as my possible breakout quarterback, so.
Right.
But I do like Minshew. I do like Minshew. This next guy is so intriguing, and I will talk about him, and it's gonna be hard to figure him out because I'm really not sure. I'm so not sure what to expect next season. But number 21, Ryan Tannehill, played in 12 games. He didn't really start until like week...
Ryan Tannehill.
Yeah, Ryan Tannehill didn't start until like week 10. I can't remember. I think it might have been week 8.
It was a little earlier.
It might have been week 8. But he had 230 fantasy points and 19 fantasy points a game. Now, this is where the reality of the situation comes in when we start talking about QB1 finishes. Over those games that he played, those 12 games that he played, he had 8 QB1 finishes. 66.67% of the time he was a QB1. That's was
electric.
Consistently getting 21 plus points per game. The other thing that he does that I noted for quarterbacks to have success in the NFL, he had 185 rushing yards. So, and that was only in what was it, 14 games, 12 games. So if he had 4 more games to play, you can guarantee he would have been over 250. I look at Ryan Tannehill, and it's so confusing because I feel the Tennessee Titans remind me of a team that runs with Ryan Tannehill next year after overpaying him, and then completely collapses, and he's just a sucky quarterback.
That's the thing with the Titans. Like you were telling me about the Bills, how you think like they're going to go 11-5 this year, and then you have a feeling that they might go like 6-10 next year. Like that's kind of how I feel about the Titans.
Yeah. I don't actually. I think the Titans have more consistency than the Bills do. And their coach is better. Bit. Their coach is better.
I like Sean McDermott.
Yeah.
I think he's a decent coach.
I think the question here is Ryan Tannehill after seeing what Ryan Tannehill did at over 8 weeks, because he's the QB 21 right now, right? So when people draft, he might go. I think he'll ultimately get drafted in the end of things, but if he might even go completely undrafted in a lot of leagues.
Yeah.
And
I think he will.
If that's the case, right? He's very much a 15th round pick for me that I'd love to have on my team.
Oh, absolutely.
But do we expect him to jump out and be the top 3 quarterback that he was this year when he was starting?
Here's what I'll say about Ryan Tannehill. I think he's worth a draft pick. Don't let him go undrafted. He's worth a draft pick. However, he had a lot of easy matchups in his big run.
Right.
He was playing consistently. Good matchup. You wanted to stream him for your playoffs like 4 weeks in advance because you saw his playoff schedule was so easy. If he has another easy schedule, then of course it's great. But if not, we're going to see the real Tannehill, I think. But on the other hand, he's got a lot of good weapons on that team too, with A.J. Brown and Corey Davis. If they keep Derrick Henry, just using him on the ground is a good weapon.
Right.
So he's got talent around him. I don't think he's going to be top 3 by any means next year, but he's worth the draft pick and could be a QB1.
Yeah, I don't disagree with you. It just the averages, the consistency, all of that stuff lines up for him. It's just, and the weapons too. It's like the team is good. Like that offense is not like AJ Brown was a monster this year, and we'll talk about him obviously as the offseason goes along. Like I love AJ Brown next year, and you still got Corey Davis who's extremely talented, but it's just like that whole team is starting to come into its own. The question is the consistency of Ryan Tannehill from year to year, because he's had some really good years and he's had some really bad years. But was that more Adam Gase or you know what I mean? Was that just Ryan Tannehill being inconsistent? Because I always thought Ryan Tannehill was a good quarterback. He just had a terrible coach.
Yeah.
So I'm like,
no, I always thought when Tannehill played with the Dolphins, I never thought he was that bad.
Right.
I never really thought he was this good, but I never thought he was like a terrible quarterback.
Right. So we're going to have to see, obviously, next year what Tannehill does, but I think he's definitely an option to keep in mind for a quarterback that might be a little bit of a sleeper, a guy that people are looking at going, well, he didn't have the greatest of seasons because he finished as QB 21. But then in the end, they're like, oh crap, why didn't I draft him? So I don't think he's going to be that league-winning quarterback like Lamar Jackson was, obviously. No. And that's, to me, in the 15th round, that's what I'm looking for. But I think in the 15th round, if you have Ryan Tannehill, like he could be a guy that you pick up, another one of those guys that you could pick up. You draft your young quarterback who you think might break out, and then you draft Ryan Tannehill and run with him. And then if it doesn't work, you got Tannehill giving you 18 and 22 points a game, and giving you at least some good options. But like you said, schedule matters. All this stuff matters. Number freaking 22 on this list is Drew Brees. I don't want to spend too much time on Brees because I think he's just about done. I think he's got fantasy life in him. He had 8 QB1 finishes, which was 72.73% of the time.
And we saw it at the end of the year. Usually most years he
falls off.
Ends up struggling. But this year he did not. Partly because I think he was injured and he didn't play like the full season. But I think Brees had a good season.
Yeah, I think he's going to retire. That would be my expectation. He might come back.
If I was a betting man, I'd probably bet that he retired as well.
Yeah, so it might be the end for him in fantasy. But if he does come back and play for New Orleans, I don't think he's a bad streaming option. I think teams will draft him, obviously, because they love Drew Brees. But I think that I hope that this was the last time we see Drew Brees. And the only reason why I say it is because it's a good little memory to have in your head for fantasy football. Oh, Drew Brees gave you some good games.
He finished out strong. If that's finished.
But let's talk about Daniel Jones, somebody who maybe we'll talk about for a long time to come. He had 226 fantasy points, played in 13 games, averaged 17 fantasy points a game. He had a 30% QB1 percentage, 4 QB1 finishes in the games he started. So he had a very good season. I mean, a very good rookie season.
Yeah, he had flashes of being a very good quarterback, which is what you look for in a rookie.
So I think, to me, like you talked about weapons, and we talked a little bit about Daniel Jones, and Joe Judge obviously is a concern. But you see, 279 rushing yards for Daniel Jones in the, what did I say? He had 13 starts. In the 13 games he played, he had 279 rushing yards. And he had 3,000 passing yards, 24 touchdowns, 21 interceptions.
Pretty solid numbers.
Like, it's pretty solid numbers. So, but I could see him taking next year with the talent and hopefully with a good offensive coach. I mean, I just don't know what to see with. We'll have to see who they sign as offensive coordinator and all that stuff for the Giants. But he could actually take a large step forward this year, enough so to get him into that top 10 of quarterbacks. If he reaches like 4,500 passing yards, 25 to 30 touchdowns, and then does what he does on the ground, like 400 rushing yards and a couple of touchdowns, like if he does that, that's a top 10 performance for a quarterback, Yeah. So he's one of those guys that I put on the list of young quarterbacks with a promising future that could possibly break out next year.
No, he's on the list too. I think as we talked about, like he's got weapons. The coach is a concern, like you said, but like he's got talent, and he's got talent around him. It's just the coach that concerns me.
Yeah, agreed. And now this final guy, I wanted to point out, and the last guy on the top 24 that we're going to talk about on this series for quarterbacks is Jacoby Brissette. He had 222 fantasy points, 15 games. This is a guy, for me, I hate to sound like Chris Collinsworth. No, this is a guy. He had 5 QB1 finishes, 33% of the time he finished as a QB1, 6 QB2 finishes. He had some good games, and he had some games where you were like, okay, they got their quarterback, and then later on it was like, no, and then it sounds like Indy kind of wants to move on or kind of wants to go for another quarterback or look for another quarterback. Watch this team to kind of try to find another guy. Landing spot for an old man. But I think, to me, if Jacoby Brissette runs it back next year and they run with him again, he actually is somewhat of an intriguing option for me. If he last year was I didn't know I was going to be the starting quarterback. And now I'm coming in and, his numbers were so gross that I'm sitting here going like, that's not going to have him, but he's good on the ground, and if he gets decent through the air, he could actually be really good.
The only argument I can see for Jacoby Brissett is having T.Y. Hilton back, who missed like half the season. Right. Eric Ebron coming back, some of his weapons coming back. Yep. Having an easier schedule because of, I think they finished in third in the NFC South. Right. I don't remember if they finished behind Jacksonville or not, but they should have an easier schedule. Right. And the fact that Brissett runs and all those things could lead him to being a good streaming option and maybe sneak in as a QB1 as like a top 12 quarterback. But yeah, I wouldn't bet on it.
No, me neither. I don't even, to be honest with you, I think Indianapolis is going to go after the heavy field of quarterbacks. Too, yeah. And they're going to try to get a guy. There's so many rich guys
out there right now.
Yeah, I think Jacoby Brissett might be out of a job, but we'll have to see what happens. That'll do it for our consistency series. Quarterbacks Part 2. It has been interesting to break down a lot of these quarterbacks. 24 quarterbacks we just discussed, and there's even some other guys that came in a little bit later. Like the Drew Locks of the world. Matt Stafford, Drew Lock. Teddy Bridgewater had some good games. We might see Sam Darnold next year a little bit more, but there's some interesting players. To me it's going to be very hard to find. Last year, like I felt like really confident saying Josh Allen, Jameis Winston, Lamar Jackson were going to be breakout quarterbacks. This year, man, all of them right, this year I'm not as confident. I'm not as confident this year. I don't know.
A lot of options.
There's a lot of options. I mean, I definitely think the headliners are probably Daniel Jones. I would say Baker Mayfield and Gardner Minshew. But it might not even be those guys either. So it's like
I think tough. It's just one of those things where we got to let the offseason play out.
Yep. That'll do it for this episode. Don't forget to check out our website, thefantasychampions.com. Give us a like on Twitter and Instagram. Enjoy your championship weekend, folks, and see you on Tuesday, Fantasy Champs.
Peace out.
Thank you for listening to the Fantasy Champions Podcast. Make sure you subscribe on iTunes and YouTube and follow us on Twitter @TheFFChamps.